Wren had learned very early in his career that the most dangerous objects in the galaxy were never the ones that looked dangerous. Weapons announced themselves. Explosives tended to glow, beep, or at the very least vibrate with a sense of malicious enthusiasm. No, the truly dangerous things were always quiet, polite even. They sat on pedestals, perfectly still, waiting for someone curious enough, or foolish enough, to treat them like artifacts instead of decisions. Which was precisely why he was now standing alone in the deepest chamber of the Vathri Royal Vault, holding a scanner in one hand and questioning every life choice that had led him here. Item log entry 47, he murmured, angling the device toward a crystalline sphere that appeared to contain a slowly rotating storm. Unidentified energy matrix emits low-frequency resonance, possible ceremonial use, or weather control, or both. Hopefully not both at the same time. The sphere pulsed faintly as if offended. Wren lowered the scanner. Right, I'm moving on. Behind him, separated by a thick pane of reinforced glass, the V3 court observed in absolute silence. They stood in a half-circle, tall and composed, their long, elegant ears angled in subtle variations that Wren had not yet learned to interpret. Suspicion, he guessed. Possibly judgment. Definitely a little bit of, why is this human touching our things? Queen Dara stood at the center of them. She did not move. She did not speak. She simply watched, and somehow that was more unsettling than if she had been shouting instructions. Wren cleared his throat and tried to look like someone who belonged in a room filled with priceless alien relics. Just a reminder, he said, glancing briefly toward the glass. I am a trained professional. One of the advisors leaned toward another and whispered something. Wren was fairly certain it was not a compliment. He turned back to the vault. The chamber extended far beyond what his initial briefing had suggested, its architecture blending smooth metallic surfaces with structures that looked almost organic, as if the room had grown rather than been built. Soft lines of light traced the walls, illuminating rows of artifacts suspended in controlled fields. Some floated, some rotated. One appeared to be gently humming a melody that shifted every time he tried to focus on it. Absolutely normal, Wren muttered. His path eventually brought him to a section that felt different. It was quieter here. Not physically. There was no measurable drop in sound. But something about the air seemed to settle, as if the space itself discouraged unnecessary noise. The lighting dimmed slightly, the soft glow narrowing toward a single recessed alcove at the far end. Wren slowed. Okay, he said under his breath. This is where the important things are, or the things that explode. Possibly both. The scanner flickered as he approached, its display struggling to stabilize. That was new. It had handled everything from unstable plasma relics to a jar labeled, "Do not open under any circumstances," without complaint. Now it simply blinked, as if reconsidering its career. Don't do this to me, Wren whispered. We talked about this. The device emitted a small, apologetic beep and then went completely blank. Wren stared at it for a moment. Great, betrayed by my own equipment. Classic. He tucked the useless scanner at his side and stepped closer to the alcove. The object within was a suit of armor. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable compared to the more elaborate artifacts surrounding it. No floating components, no shifting geometry, no visible energy field. It stood upright on a simple support frame, its surface dark and matte, absorbing the light rather than reflecting it. But the longer Wren looked, the more details emerged. Fine lines traced across the armor's surface, too precise to be decorative, yet too subtle to be purely structural. Patterns, no symbols, layered over one another, forming a design that felt deliberate, intentional. Waiting. Unassigned Relic 7A, Wren said quietly, recalling the designation from his briefing. That is a deeply uninspiring name for something that looks like it could win a war. Behind the glass, the court shifted almost imperceptibly. Queen Dara's gaze sharpened. Wren noticed. Of course he noticed. It was difficult not to notice when an entire room of elegant, long-eared observers suddenly leaned into the moment. Right, he said, raising his hand slightly. No touching. I remember the rules. I respect the rules. I am a rule-respecting individual. He took one step closer. However, he added, the rules did not specify what counts as touching. Another step. Is it touching if it's just proximity? The armor did not respond. Ren exhaled slowly, studying it. There was no visible power source, no interface, no indication that it had been active at any point in recent history. It looked quite simply like something that had been left behind, forgotten. That seems unlikely, he murmured. You don't forget something like this. His hand lifted before his better judgment could intervene. Behind the glass, one of the advisors made a sharp movement. Queen Dara did not. She remained still, her attention fixed entirely on Ren. This is purely for cataloging purposes, Ren said, as if that would somehow justify what he was about to do. Minimal contact, scientific curiosity, very professional. His fingers hovered just above the surface. For a moment, nothing happened. The vault seemed to hold its breath. Ren hesitated, then with the kind of quiet decisiveness that often preceded extremely poor decisions, he touched the armor. The world changed. Light erupted across the surface in an instant, lines of energy racing along the etch patterns, igniting them in brilliant, cascading sequences. The symbols flared to life, sharp and precise, forming structures that Ren could not comprehend, but somehow felt. Oh, he said very calmly, that's not good. The hum began low, almost inaudible, then deepened, resonating through the floor, through his boots, through his bones. The support frame dissolved, no, retracted, its components folding away as the armor lifted, weightless and deliberate. Ren took a step back. The armor followed. Okay, he said, raising both hands. We're going to stop right there. That's the maximum level of interaction I am comfortable with. The armor did not stop. Panels shifted, unfolding with mechanical precision, surrounding him before he could react. Segments aligned with his body, locking into place with soft, decisive clicks. Wait, no, this is definitely... The chest piece sealed. The hum stabilized. Silence returned, sudden and absolute. Ren stood motionless, encased in something that had not moved in 200 years. Behind the glass, no one spoke. Ren looked down at his hands. The armor fit perfectly. He flexed his fingers. It responded. Well, he said after a long pause, this feels like something I'm going to have to explain. Ren did not move at first, not because he was calm, but because something deep inside him had made a very reasonable decision. Do not antagonize the ancient alien warsuit currently hugging your entire body. Okay, he said slowly, testing his voice. It echoed differently now, carried through the armor with a faint harmonic distortion that made him sound far more confident than he actually felt. We are going to remain completely still and pretend this is normal. The armor disagreed. A soft vibration traveled along his spine, subtle but deliberate, like a tap on the shoulder from something that did not accept hesitation as a valid response. Lines of light pulsed faintly across his arms, then settled into a steady glow. Ren glanced down again. No sudden movements, he whispered. His right hand lifted. He stared at it. I did not authorize that. The hand rotated slightly, fingers flexing with precise control. His control, but enhanced, refined. The armor was not forcing him. It was guiding him. That's somehow worse, Ren muttered. Behind the glass, the Vathri court remained frozen in a silence so complete it felt ceremonial. Queen Dara had stepped closer, her expression sharpened into something that was no longer just observation. It was calculation. Ren raised his hand again, this time intentionally, and gave a small, awkward wave. Hello, he said. No one waved back. He lowered his hand. Tough crowd. A new sensation spread through the armor, not physical this time, but cognitive. Information pressed gently against the edges of his awareness. Systems, structures, something vast and layered, like a language he almost understood, but not quite. Then a voice, clear and precise, formed inside his mind. Bearer recognized. Ren blinked. That's new. He looked around the chamber, as if expecting someone else to have heard it. The Vathri remained silent, though a few of them exchanged sharp glances. Just to clarify, Ren said aloud, tapping the side of his helmet with one finger. Did anyone else hear that, or am I now having a very advanced conversation with my own nervous system? No response. Right. Private conversation. Good to know. The voice continued. Activation sequence complete. Primary systems online. Ren exhaled slowly. Of course they are. He shifted his weight experimentally. The armor moved with him instantly, perfectly balanced, as if it had already mapped every possible motion he could make. There was no resistance, no delay. If anything, it felt like the suit had anticipated his movement before he had fully decided to make it. That's unsettlingly efficient, he admitted. He took a step forward. The floor responded. Not visibly, but he felt it. Micro adjustments beneath his feet, stabilizing his stance, compensating for shifts in mass and momentum. The entire chamber seemed to recognize him now, reacting in subtle ways that he could not fully perceive, but could definitely feel. Ren stopped. Okay, I'm going to need a manual, preferably one that doesn't involve me accidentally launching something. The armor pulsed once, faintly. Behind the glass, one of the advisors finally spoke, his voice tight. Your Majesty, we must deactivate it. Ren turned his head slightly, the helmet following with smooth precision. I agree, he said. That sounds like a fantastic plan. I support this plan completely. Queen Dara did not look at the advisor. Her eyes remained fixed on Ren. Remove it, she said. Ren nodded immediately. Yes, excellent suggestion. I will do that right now. He reached for the edge of the chest plate. Nothing happened. He pulled harder. Still nothing. The armor responded with a subtle shift, as if adjusting itself to make removal slightly less convenient. Ren paused. That was rude. He tried again, this time attempting to slide one of the arm segments loose. It did not move, not even slightly. Okay, he said, lowering his hands. So, minor update. I do not appear to have the authority to remove this. A faint ripple of unease moved through the court. Ren raised a finger. Before anyone panics, I would like to point out that I am also not doing anything threatening. I am, in fact, standing very politely in your vault. The armor hummed softly as if in agreement. One of the guards shifted his stance, clearly uncertain whether to approach or retreat. Ren noticed and offered a reassuring smile that was entirely hidden behind the helmet. I promise, he added, if I figure out how to accidentally become dangerous, I will let you know in advance. The guard did not look reassured. Queen Dara stepped forward, closer to the glass than before. Up close, her features were even more precise. Her long ears angled slightly back in a way that Ren was beginning to suspect meant something important. This armor, she said slowly, has not responded to any living being for 200 years. Ren nodded. That sounds like a very long nap. It is bound to the bloodline of the old dynasty. Ah, Ren said. There's the problem. She studied him. You are not Vathri. Last I checked, no. And yet it recognizes you. Ren glanced down at his hands again, watching the faint lines of light shift subtly with his movement. I'm starting to think it has a very different hiring criteria than you expected. A few of the younger Vathri exchanged looks. One of them almost smiled before catching himself. The voice returned, quieter this time. Awaiting directive. Ren froze. Okay, he whispered. That sounds like responsibility. He straightened slightly, then immediately regretted how natural the motion felt. The armor responded, amplifying the movement into something far more composed than he intended. Right, he said louder now. Directive. Yes, good. We're going to keep this very simple. He paused, thinking. Then carefully he said, Stand down. The armor pulsed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the hum softened, the light dimming, just slightly, settling into a steady, controlled state. Ren exhaled. That worked. He looked up at Queen Dara. See? We're communicating. This is progress. She did not smile, but something in her expression shifted. Less disbelief now. More attention. Ren shifted his stance again, testing the limits of what the armor would allow. It moved with him effortlessly, as if it had always belonged there. That's still incredibly concerning, he muttered. The voice responded, almost patiently. System stability confirmed. Ren nodded slowly. Good. I like stability. Stability is underrated. He glanced at the court again, then back at his hands. The armor hummed, quiet and steady, as if it had simply been waiting for him to catch up. Well, Ren said with a small, resigned sigh, this is definitely going to complicate the paperwork. Ren discovered, within the next few seconds, that standing still inside an ancient alien warsuit while an entire royal court stared at you was somehow more exhausting than running for your life. Right, he said, mostly to himself, though the armor carried his voice outward with an unearned sense of authority. We've established that I cannot remove this. It talks to me, and it thinks I'm important. All very manageable problems. The armor responded with a faint, almost approving vibration. Don't encourage me, Ren added quickly. A flicker of movement appeared at the edge of his vision. No, not movement. Information. A translucent layer of symbols unfolded across his sight, delicate and precise, aligning themselves with the geometry of the room. The vault became mapped, measured, understood in ways he had no vocabulary for. Oh, Ren whispered. Oh, that's, actually impressive. Distances resolved themselves instantly. Structural integrity, energy signatures, even the subtle fluctuations of the floating artifacts. Everything was presented to him in a quiet stream of data that felt less like reading and more like remembering. He blinked hard. The overlay dimmed slightly, as if responding to his discomfort. Thank you, he said reflexively. Behind the glass, one of the advisors leaned forward. He is reacting to something, the Vaythri said, voice tight. We cannot see what he perceives. Ren pointed at his helmet. Yes, because I'm currently seeing things you are not. I assume that's normal for your ancient relics? No one answered. Good, he continued. We're all learning together. The voice returned, clearer now. Environmental analysis complete. Ren nodded slowly. That sounds useful. He glanced around the chamber again, this time with the armor's assistance. Every surface, every artifact, every microscopic fluctuation in energy felt organized, predictable. The vault was no longer a mysterious collection of relics. It was a system. That's unsettling, he admitted. I preferred it when things were confusing. The armor hummed softly as if disagreeing with his priorities. Ren shifted his weight again, testing the limits of his movement. This time the armor responded differently. His posture adjusted automatically, aligning him into a stance that felt deliberate, balanced, prepared. He frowned. Why am I suddenly standing like I know what I'm doing? The answer came immediately. Combat readiness optimal. Ren froze. No. The armor subtly repositioned his feet. No, he repeated louder. We are not doing combat readiness. We are doing peaceful archivist standing. Very non-threatening. Extremely harmless. The armor paused, then, reluctantly it seemed, relaxed the stance just enough to satisfy his request. Thank you, Ren said, exhaling. That was almost a problem. Behind the glass, the court exchanged uneasy glances. Queen Dara remained still, though her gaze had sharpened even further, if that was possible. You are communicating with it, she said. Ren tilted his head slightly. Yes, it's very polite, actually. Direct, efficient, slightly opinionated. What does it want? Ren hesitated. The question lingered longer than it should have. I don't know, he admitted. The voice did not respond. That somehow was worse. Ren looked down at his hands again, watching the faint lines of light shift across the armor's surface. They were not random. They pulsed with a rhythm, subtle but consistent, like a heartbeat that had been waiting far too long to resume. Okay, he said quietly, more serious now. Let's try something else. He straightened slightly, focusing. If you can understand me, he said, directing the thought inward as much as outward, then I need you to tell me what you're doing. A pause, then, awaiting directive. Ren blinked. That's not an answer. Silence. All right, he continued, rubbing the side of his helmet. New approach. What are you? The response came slower this time, as if searching through something vast and fragmented. Designation. Incomplete. Ren frowned. That's not reassuring. He glanced toward the court. It doesn't seem to know what it is. A ripple of tension passed through the Vaythri. That is impossible, one advisor said. The armor is a relic of the old dynasty. Its purpose is recorded. Ren shrugged slightly. Then your records might be incomplete. The advisor did not appreciate that. Queen Dara, however, stepped forward again, her voice quieter now. Ask it who it serves. Ren hesitated, then nodded. All right. He focused again, directing the thought inward. Who do you serve? The response came instantly this time. Bearer. Ren blinked. That's unhelpfully direct. He looked up at Queen Dara. It says it serves the bearer, and it considers you the bearer. Yes, Ren said, which is still very much a mystery to me. He shifted slightly, the armor adjusting with him in perfect synchronization. The sense of alignment, of control, was growing stronger, more natural with each passing second. That's concerning, he muttered. I feel like I'm getting better at this without trying. The voice responded again, softer now. Synchronization increasing? Ren stiffened. No, we are not increasing synchronization. We are maintaining a safe, reasonable distance. The armor pulsed once, as if acknowledging his concern without agreeing to it. Behind the glass, one of the younger Vathri leaned toward another and whispered something. This time, Ren caught a glimpse of amusement before it was quickly hidden. Good, Ren said, pointing slightly in their direction. At least someone is enjoying this. The younger Vathri immediately straightened, pretending to be extremely serious. Ren nodded. Thought so. He turned back to Queen Dara, his expression shifting slightly. So, he said, just to summarize, your ancient, bloodline-locked war armor has decided that I am its bearer, it won't come off, and it's getting more comfortable with me by the second. A pause. Is that a problem? No one answered. The armor hummed quietly, steady and patient, as if, from its perspective, nothing unusual had happened at all. Ren decided after a long and thoughtful 3 seconds that if he was going to be trapped inside a 200-year-old alien war suit, he might as well test how bad the situation really was. All right, he said, rolling his shoulders slightly. The armor adjusted instantly, smoothing the motion into something far more precise than he intended. We're going to try something very simple. Nothing dramatic, no sudden movements, just walking. The armor did not object. Ren took a careful step forward. The result was efficient, too efficient. His foot landed exactly where it needed to, his balance correcting before he even felt himself shift. It was like his body had been replaced by a version of itself that had practiced this movement 1,000 times. He stopped immediately. Okay, that was suspiciously good, the voice responded without hesitation. Motor function optimization active. Ren sighed. Of course it is. Behind the glass, the Vathri court reacted to the movement more than the words. A few of the guards subtly adjusted their stance, hands drifting closer to weapons they had not yet drawn. The advisors leaned forward, tension tightening the air. Queen Dara remained still, but her eyes tracked every detail. Ren raised both hands slowly. I am still not doing anything aggressive, he said. This is what we call light movement, very non-threatening. He took another step, this time intentionally less precise. The armor corrected him. His posture straightened, his weight distributed perfectly, his motion smoothed into something that looked far more deliberate than he had planned. Ren paused mid-step. I tried to make that awkward, he said quietly. It refused. The armor emitted a faint, almost disapproving hum. Don't judge me, Ren added. A faint ripple of sound, almost laughter, escaped from somewhere among the younger Vathri before being quickly suppressed. Ren caught it and pointed vaguely in that direction. I heard that, he said. This is a serious situation. No one admitted to it. Ren exhaled and focused again. All right, he murmured. Let's try something else. He lifted his arm slightly, then rotated his wrist. The armor responded instantly, amplifying the motion into something fluid and controlled. The lines of light across the surface shifted in response, faint patterns aligning and dissolving as if reacting to his intent. Ren watched it closely. You're not just following me, he said. You're anticipating. The voice answered. Predictive synchronization active. Ren closed his eyes for a brief moment. That sounds like a feature I should have been informed about. He opened them again and looked toward the glass. Just so everyone knows, he said, I am currently sharing decision-making responsibilities with something that predicts what I'm going to do before I do it. One of the advisors looked deeply uncomfortable. Another looked like they were reconsidering every assumption they had ever made about reality. Queen Dara stepped closer. What happens if you resist it? She asked. Ren considered that. Good question. He lifted his arm again, this time deliberately attempting to move unpredictably, jerking slightly to the side, then stopping halfway. The armor resisted, not forcefully, not aggressively, but firmly enough to guide the motion back into alignment. Ren froze. That, he said slowly, is new. He tried again, this time more forcefully. The armor responded with a stronger correction. The movement redirected into a smooth, controlled arc that ended in a perfectly balanced stance. Ren lowered his arm. Okay, he said. So I have partial control. The voice responded, calm and precise. Coordination maintained. Ren pointed at his helmet. See, that doesn't sound like I'm in charge. The armor hummed, as if amused by the distinction. Behind the glass, tension tightened again. The guards shifted more noticeably now, their unease no longer subtle. The advisors whispered rapidly among themselves, their long ears angling sharply as they exchanged urgent thoughts. Queen Dara, however, did not look away. You are not controlling it, she said. Ren shook his head slightly. No, I think we're negotiating. He glanced down at his hands again, watching the faint light pulse along the armor's surface. It felt different now, less like something foreign and more like something present. A second layer of awareness, quietly observing, quietly responding. That's not concerning at all, he muttered. The voice returned, softer this time. Integration increasing? Ren stiffened. No. The armor pulsed once. No, he repeated more firmly. We are not increasing anything. We are maintaining current levels. Stable levels. Very stable. A pause, then stability maintained. Ren blinked. Thank you. He exhaled slowly, trying to steady himself. All right, he said, more to himself than anyone else. We can work with this. He shifted his stance again, more carefully now, testing the limits without pushing too far. The armor responded smoothly, but this time he could feel it. Subtle adjustments, gentle corrections, always guiding him towards something more efficient, more precise, more capable. Ren swallowed. That's definitely concerning, he whispered. He looked up at Queen Dara. So, he said, forcing a small, controlled smile into his voice. Hypothetically speaking, if this thing decides it likes me too much, is there a backup plan? Silence. Then after a moment, Queen Dara spoke. No. Ren nodded slowly. Good, he said. I always appreciate clarity. The armor hummed quietly, steady and patient, as if it had all the time in the world. Ren came to a quiet, uncomfortable realization. The armor was not trying to control him. It was trying to help. That, unfortunately, made everything significantly worse. All right, he said slowly, standing in the center of the vault like a man who had accidentally been promoted far beyond his qualifications. We need to establish boundaries. The armor hummed. I mean it, Ren continued, lifting a finger, as if scolding a particularly advanced piece of technology. You and I are going to have a very clear agreement. I make decisions. You assist, lightly. The voice responded immediately. Directive acknowledged. Ren blinked. That was too easy. Behind the glass, the Vathri court shifted again, but this time the tension was mixed with something else. Curiosity, cautious and growing. They were no longer just watching a problem. They were watching something unfold. Ren took a slow breath. Okay, he murmured. Let's test this. He focused, deliberately forming a simple intention. Move forward. Normally, no optimization, no predictive correction. He stepped. The armor responded. It did not override him this time. It followed. Perfectly, yes, but without that subtle push, that quiet insistence on improvement. It moved as he moved, not ahead of him. Ren stopped. Huh, he said. The voice remained silent. Ren looked down at his hands again, flexing his fingers. The light patterns shifted gently but without urgency. You listened, he said. A soft pulse answered him. Behind the glass, Queen Dara's eyes narrowed slightly. What changed? Ren glanced up. I asked it to behave, he said. And it did. A murmur spread through the court. That is not how the armor works, one advisor insisted. It does not take requests, it enforces. Ren tilted his head. Well, it seems to have updated its policy. The younger guard from earlier shifted again, this time less tense, more intrigued. Ren caught the movement and gave a small nod. See, he said, we're all adapting. The guard quickly looked away. Ren exhaled and turned his attention inward again. All right, he said quietly, directing the thought toward the armor. If we're going to work together, I need to understand what you're doing. A pause, then, assisting bearer. Ren nodded. Yes, I gathered that. But how? The response came slower this time, as if translating something complex into something he could grasp. Enhancing efficiency, preserving stability, ensuring continuity. Ren frowned slightly. Continuity of what? Silence. He waited. Nothing. You're very selective with your answers, he said. The armor pulsed faintly, unapologetic. Ren sighed. Of course you are. He shifted his stance again, more confidently now. The armor moved with him, smooth and responsive, but no longer intrusive. It felt balanced, not passive, but cooperative. That's better, he admitted. Behind the glass, the advisors were speaking more openly now, their voices low but urgent. Ren could not hear the exact words, but the tone was clear. This was no longer just an anomaly. It was a contradiction. Queen Dara raised a hand, silencing them. You said it responds to intention, she said. Ren nodded. Seems like it. Then test it. Ren hesitated. Carefully, she added. Ah, Ren said. That's the important part. He considered for a moment, then lifted his arm again. All right, he murmured. Let's try something simple. He focused, forming a clear, deliberate thought. Lift arm, slowly. The armor responded exactly as instructed. No adjustment, no correction, just movement. Ren smiled slightly. Good. He shifted his focus. Faster. The arm moved faster, stronger. The motion sharpened, the movement gaining precision and force without losing control. Ren stopped. That's impressive, he said. The voice returned. Capability aligned with directive. Ren nodded slowly. So you're scaling based on what I ask for. A soft pulse confirmed it. He looked up at Queen Dara. It's not forcing anything, he said. It's waiting. For what? Ren paused. Then he answered quieter this time. For me to decide. The words settled into the room, heavier than expected. The advisors fell silent again. Queen Dara studied him, her expression unreadable. Ren shifted slightly, the armor responding with effortless precision. It felt natural now, disturbingly so. That's the part I don't like, he admitted. It's not taking control. It's giving it to me. The voice responded, calm and steady. Bearer is primary. Ren let out a slow breath. Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. Behind the glass, the younger guard leaned forward again, unable to hide his curiosity this time. Ren noticed and gave a small, reassuring shrug. Don't worry, he said. I'm just as confused as you are. The guard almost smiled. Ren looked down at his hands once more, watching the light shift with his movement. It no longer felt like something foreign. It felt like something waiting, not for orders, for purpose. Ren swallowed. That's, a lot of responsibility for someone who was just cataloging artifacts 10 minutes ago. The armor hummed softly, patient, as if time had never been a concern. Ren had reached the stage of the situation where everything was working just well enough to be deeply suspicious. That's it, he said quietly, shifting his weight with cautious confidence. I don't trust this level of cooperation. The armor hummed, faint and steady. I mean it, Ren continued, glancing down at his hands. You're being helpful, predictable, respectful. That is not how ancient, mysterious technology behaves. A brief pause. Then, correction, behavior aligned with bearer preference. Ren stared straight ahead. You're adapting to me. Affirmative. He exhaled slowly. That's worse. Behind the glass, the V3 court had grown quieter, but not calmer. Their silence now carried focus rather than shock. They were watching patterns form, conclusions assembling piece by piece, and none of them seemed particularly comfortable with where those conclusions might lead. Queen Dara stepped slightly to the side, changing her angle of view as if studying him from a different perspective might reveal something the first had not. What happens, she asked, if you stop directing it? Ren blinked. You mean, do nothing? Yes, Ren hesitated. I am not usually rewarded for doing nothing, he said. Try. He sighed. All right, if this goes poorly, I would like it noted that this was not my idea. He relaxed. Not physically. That part was easy, but mentally. He stopped forming intentions, stopped guiding movement, stopped thinking in terms of commands and responses. He simply stood there, inside the armor, doing nothing at all. For a moment, nothing changed. Then the armor shifted, not abruptly, not aggressively, but subtly enough to make Ren very aware of it. His posture adjusted, slightly straighter, slightly more balanced. His breathing slowed, his center of gravity aligned with an efficiency that felt practiced. Ren frowned. "I did not authorize that," the voice answered, calm as ever. "Stability maintenance active." Ren kept still. "I'm not doing anything." "Correct. That was not an invitation." The armor made a small correction to his stance. Ren inhaled sharply. "Okay, that's exactly what I was worried about." Behind the glass, one of the advisors leaned forward, his voice barely contained. "It is operating autonomously." Another responded quickly, "No, it is maintaining baseline function." Ren pointed toward them without turning his head. "I can hear the panic. Let's keep it at a manageable level, please." The younger guard from earlier coughed again, unsuccessfully hiding what might have been a laugh. Ren closed his eyes for a brief second. Of course he finds this funny. He opened them again and focused. "All right," he said quietly, directing his thoughts inward once more. "We need to clarify something." The armor responded immediately. "Listening." Ren nodded. "Good. When I stop giving instructions, you don't get to improvise." A pause, then, "Clarification required." Ren tilted his head. "You just adjusted my posture without me asking." "Adjustment required for optimal stability." Ren exhaled. "I was stable." "Correction, suboptimal stability." Ren stared straight ahead. "You're very confident for something that doesn't have a name." The armor hummed softly, unconcerned. Behind the glass, Queen Dara's gaze sharpened further. "It is not disobeying you," she said. "It is interpreting you." Ren glanced toward her. "That feels like a very important distinction." "It does not act without reason," she continued, "even when you give none." Ren considered that. "So," he said slowly, "it fills in the gaps." No one answered, because no one needed to. Ren shifted slightly, this time deliberately, and the armor followed without interference. "All right," he murmured. "Then we need to limit the gaps." The voice responded. "Directive accepted." Ren nodded. "Good." He took a small step forward, testing the balance again. The armor moved with him, precise but restrained, as if respecting an unspoken boundary. "That's better," he said. Then, without warning, the overlay returned. Not gradually, instantly. Symbols flooded his vision, sharper than before, more detailed, more complete. The vault unfolded into layers of information, structural stress points, energy distributions, even the faint biological signatures of every Vathri behind the glass. Ren froze. "That's new," he whispered. The voice answered. "Expanded awareness enabled." Ren swallowed. "I did not ask for expanded awareness. Capability available. That does not mean I want it." The data continued to flow, overwhelming in its precision. Ren squeezed his eyes shut. "Disable," he said quickly. The overlay vanished. Silence returned. Ren opened his eyes again, breathing slightly faster now. "Okay," he said. "We are setting another rule." The armor hummed. "No new features without permission," he continued. "None. 0. I am already at capacity." A pause, then, "Acknowledged." Ren nodded slowly. "Thank you." Behind the glass, the court was no longer just uneasy. They were attentive, focused, because what they were witnessing was no longer just activation. It was adaptation. Queen Dara stepped closer to the glass, her voice quieter now but more certain. "It is learning you." Ren let out a small, humorless laugh. "That makes two of us." He glanced down at his hands again, watching the faint lines of light pulse in steady rhythm. It felt synchronized now. Not fully, not completely, but enough to notice. Ren exhaled slowly. "That's definitely not going to be a problem later," he said. The armor hummed, patient as ever, as if it had already considered every version of what came next. Ren stood very still, not because he was unsure anymore, but because for the first time since the armor had awakened, he understood what stillness actually meant. It was not the absence of motion, it was the presence of control. "All right," he said quietly, looking at his hands at the faint lines of light that no longer felt foreign. Let's finish this properly. The armor responded, not with a pulse this time, but with something subtler, a quiet alignment, as if it had been waiting for him to reach that exact sentence. Behind the glass, the Vathri court remained silent, but the silence had changed again. It was no longer filled with tension or disbelief. It had weight now, expectation. Queen Dara stepped forward until she stood directly before the reinforced barrier, her gaze steady, unflinching. "You understand it now," she said. Ren exhaled softly. "I understand enough." He lifted his head slightly, meeting her eyes through the glass. It wasn't waiting for a bloodline. A faint shift passed through the court. It was waiting for someone to choose, he continued. The armor hummed, low and steady. Ren turned his attention inward. "You don't serve me," he said, not as a question, but as a realization. "You respond to direction, purpose, not identity." A pause, then, "Bearer defines directive?" Ren nodded slowly. "Exactly." He took a step forward, this time without hesitation, without testing, without doubt. The armor moved with him, not guiding, not correcting, simply following. That was new. Behind the glass, the advisors exchanged glances, but none of them spoke. Even the guards stood still now, no longer unsure whether to act. Ren stopped just short of the barrier. "For 200 years, he said, his voice steady, this thing has been waiting for someone to tell it what to do." He let that settle, and everyone assumed that meant blood. Queen Dara's expression shifted just slightly. "What do you intend to do with it?" she asked. Ren smiled faintly. "That's the first time anyone's asked me that instead of telling me to take it off." A few of the younger Vathri failed to suppress their reactions this time. A quiet ripple of laughter passed through them before fading just as quickly. Ren glanced in their direction. "Progress," he said. Then he turned back to the queen. "I'm not going to take it," he said simply. The words landed harder than expected. The advisors stiffened. One of them opened his mouth to protest, then stopped. Queen Dara did not react immediately. "You cannot remove it." Ren shook his head. "That's not what I mean." He lifted his hand slightly, watching the light respond, steady and calm. "I'm not going to claim it," he clarified. "Not as something I own. Not as something that belongs to me." The armor remained silent. "For 2 centuries, Ren continued, you've all been waiting for the right person to come along and prove they deserve it." He tilted his head slightly. "What if that was never the point?" Silence. Ren exhaled. "It doesn't need a ruler," he said. "It needs direction." The voice responded, softer now. "Directive pending." Ren nodded once. "Good," he said. He straightened, not because the armor adjusted him, but because he chose to. Then he spoke clearly, deliberately. "Stand down." The armor pulsed. Not like before. Deeper, slower. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the light began to fade. Not all at once, but gradually the patterns dimming, the hum softening until it became almost imperceptible. The structure of the armor shifted, not disengaging, but settling, returning to something closer to stillness. Ren felt it. The connection did not vanish. It quieted, balanced. He flexed his fingers once more. The armor followed, but without urgency, without expectation. "That's better," he murmured. Behind the glass, the court did not move. Queen Dara stepped closer, her voice low. "You are relinquishing control." Ren shrugged slightly. "I'm redefining it." She studied him for a long moment. "And what are you now?" she asked. Ren glanced down at himself, then back up at her. "Still an archivist," he said, "just with better equipment." That earned a real reaction this time. Not loud, not disruptive, but unmistakable. The tension that had filled the room since the beginning finally broke, replaced by something lighter, something unfamiliar. Relief. The barrier between them opened with a soft mechanical shift. No alarms, no resistance. Ren stepped forward, crossing the threshold. No one stopped him. The guards held their positions, but their hands were no longer near their weapons. The advisors watched, but without urgency. The younger Vathri did not even try to hide their curiosity anymore. Queen Dara stood before him, closer than she had been since the beginning, Up close, she seemed less distant, less untouchable, still composed, still commanding, but no longer separated by certainty. The armor chose you, she said. Ren shook his head gently. No. He met her gaze. I chose what to do with it. A pause. Then slowly, she inclined her head. Not as a ruler acknowledging a subject, but as one recognizing another. Ren exhaled, the weight of the moment settling in a way that felt complete. He looked down at his hands one last time. The light was still there, quiet, waiting, but no longer demanding anything. All right, he said softly. I think we can work with this. The armor hummed once, not as a command, not as a signal, but as something simpler. Agreement.